Welcome to Ride the Wave, hosted by me, Jeff Fisher, and co-hosted by Mark Robinson, in partnership with the Ride the Wave Foundation. Visit us at ridethewave.org, where we're dedicated to empowering their lives through free resources in servant leadership, mental health wellness, and how to find a purpose. At Ride the Wave, we believe in the power of every story, talent, and voice. Our commitment is clear: to bridge divides, unite communities, and build an all-inclusive, modern campus for those experiencing homelessness. So let's dive in and ride the wave of positive change together. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Thanks for joining us and riding the wave. Mark Robinson, what's happening, buddy?
What's going on, Jeff?
Not too much. Doing well. How's everything going with you?
Can't complain. Can't complain.
Glad
to be here.
Yeah, another show. We're glad there's a man with, he needs no introduction at all. Dr. Matt is back. That's right. Glad to have you back, sir.
Hey, thanks very much for having me, Jeff.
Absolutely.
And Mark.
Glad to have you, Jeff.
Absolutely. And you could go to 100% chiropractic, in Rockaway. Dr. Matt's a chiropractor there. They do amazing work. Go check him out. Also, check out episode 27, because we're piggybacking off of that. That was a really good episode on how the body thrives, the 80-20 rule, and we talked about the Paleo Diet as well. And now we're going to do a deeper dive into the Paleo Diet. There was a lot of interesting stuff with that, sort of our ancestral, type of food that we grew up with. So yeah, Matt, just go right ahead, dive right in wherever you want to start off, man.
All right, awesome. It's good to be back. Hi, everybody. And yeah, definitely check out our last episode that we did, because the big idea that we talked about there was using the 80-20 principle to guide what you do. So don't make perfect the enemy of good. And today what I want to explore is what it would actually look like to eat a paleo diet. And it's actually pretty fun. Right now, Dr. Sarah at the office has been doing what we talked about in the last episode, where for 6 days a week, you eat clean, you eat the paleo diet, and then 1 day a week, you get that kind of release valve. You get that day where you can, yesterday, we actually had a team barbecue at Dr. Sarah's house, and there were chocolate chip cookies, and there's some drinking of alcohol, and there was things like that that don't fall into the paleo diet. And it was actually awesome. I was talking with Dr. Sarah on Thursday because her mom had actually made homemade chocolate chip cookies, which is like Dr. Sarah's go-to number one food, right?
Nice.
And
yeah, I love chocolate chip cookies.
Right? Who doesn't, right? And they had been dropped off. They were in her kitchen, and she was so excited to eat them when she first saw them when she got home on Thursday night. And she was like, no, I'm going to hold the line, right? I'm going to eat these cookies on Friday because that's the day we're doing the barbecue. That's the day I planned to be my cheat day, right? The day that I can eat whatever I really want, right? And it's actually been pretty cool. And she's been telling all the patients and how cool she's noticed her energy levels are much more stable.
Yeah.
Mood and emotion is very stable. Sleep is better. And just overall, her energy is good. She feels good. She feels healthy. And so using that kind of as the baseline, what would it really look like to eat a paleo diet? And broadly, the foods that are in the paleo diet as categories are animal foods. So meat, which would include meat, organs, eggs, fish, chicken, right? All of that, right? If it's an animal or an animal byproduct like that, from like an egg perspective, that's good to go. Then dairy is kind of the caveat. Dairy really is dependent on your own body. Do you tolerate dairy well or not well? But in the strictest sense, in a paleo diet, dairy is not part of a paleo diet. Okay. And we'll kind of bookmark that, and then we'll go back to that because there's nuance even around that of like what categories of dairy are more well tolerated and which ones are less tolerated. So meat and eggs is category 1. That's mainly your protein and fat source. Then the next category would be your vegetables. So you can eat all sorts of vegetables. Things that don't count as vegetables are going to be soy, beans, corn, all of those things that people might think of as a vegetable aren't actually vegetables. Corn would be a grain, and beans, legumes, and soy are actually in the broader category of legume, and legume is not paleo. So meat and eggs, vegetables, fruit, you're good to go on all fruit. And then nuts and seeds, you can eat those as well. And then, of course, seasonings. So when we think about seasonings, they're basically going to be something that was already mentioned, right? Like herbs kind of fall into the vegetable category too, right? So basically like basil, thyme, rosemary, those types of things, that's all allowed. And then things like garlic powder, right? And onion powder, those already fall into the vegetable category, right? Hot peppers, so red pepper flakes and black pepper, and of course salt. Salt is essential for all of us as an electrolyte. And so that's your categories of food.
How about fiber? Is without grain, things like that, could it be difficult? I guess fruit, there's fiber, things like that. Where would somebody go for that? Is it in beans and fruit mostly, or?
Okay, great question. Yeah, you're going to get a lot of fiber in vegetables. Now it varies, right? Some vegetables are lower fiber, some vegetables are higher fiber. Something like kale, going to be pretty high in fiber. Something like, I don't know, a zucchini, probably lower in fiber, right? So there's a spectrum there. But yeah, you would get necessary fiber from your vegetables and your fruit. And like you mentioned, fruit will have fiber in it as well. And even there's kind of some arguments on like how much fiber do we really need. But yeah, you'll definitely get it from your fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I was thinking, or lack thereof grain or anything like that, where maybe lack of fiber within it. But I know that fruit and like you mentioned, kale, other things could supplement that.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, because a lot of people want to figure out like how do I regulate my digestion and all of that. Actually, the strong argument is that your digestion will be well regulated by eating these specific paleo foods rather than a bunch of other foods that are not actually what we're adapted to eat. And this, for everybody watching again, this goes back to our prior episode, and even we even touched on this on my very first episode.
Yeah.
What was that, episode 14?
Something like that, yep.
And
14.
But definitely the reason that paleo works, the reason that it makes sense is that there is an evolutionary context to where we come from. And so we are not just humans that showed up in 2024, right? We're humans that showed up from thousands and thousands and thousands of generations of even pre-Homo sapien. And so if you draw it back far enough, the most common branch point between our most modern day similar organism is a chimpanzee. So that's the closest living thing that's not Homo sapien today. And if you put that branch point 7 million years ago, there's a line that goes out like this. And at one end you get chimpanzee, and at one end you get Homo sapien. And there's a bunch of stuff in the middle there. And this is kind of cool because this goes into where we were talking a little before the podcast of like, how did we become human?
Yeah, because I had seen something, and I can't remember exactly the source or 100% what it was, but something with humans eventually cooking, or during that process, cooking meals, and then the protein. You had mentioned bone marrow during scavenger and things like that. So that type of food, doing things, whether it be connecting, cells or brain, helping our brain to grow essentially.
Yeah.
Because of the proteins or the way we're eating. I don't know if it has anything specifically to do with cooking the food itself, whether that does something different to the proteins and where we'd ingest it and that would happen. But yeah, there was something there that I did see.
Yeah.
That could be part of our evolution there, the food.
I think it does actually, because if you think about it, you know how when they make collard greens and stuff like that, people use the bone. They cook with the bone, the neck bone.
Yeah.
They get the juices and the vitamins and minerals from the bone.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Not necessarily breaking open the bone and taking all the bone marrow out. But they cook the bone to enough where I guess it cooks from the inside out.
Mhm.
I'm saying it cooks the marrow from the inside out of the bone, and you get the nutrients from the marrow from the inside out of
Yeah,
the
traditional
bone.
cooking from way back. And so, yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, and a lot of those recipes are cooked with like collard greens, a bunch of other recipes that are cooked with the bone.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
And that's a great point, is the inclusion of, when we talked about meat, we also want to talk about organ meat. And that's something that almost nobody really eats anymore, is organ meat, right? Much more commonly, people are eating, oh, I want a ribeye steak, or I want a filet, or a New York strip, or something like that, chicken breast, right? Like, people tend to kind of go towards, that's pretty much all the meat that everybody eats all the time, right?
Yeah.
But there's so much more to an animal than just that muscle meat. And
like liver.
Liver is the king organ to eat, actually. It's super nutrient dense, and it has a bunch of nutrients that are not actually either present at all or present in nearly as high a quantities in muscle meat, right? Because pretty much what we eat when we think of eating meat is muscle meat.
Yeah.
And so that's a great point, right? Like, we have a lot of evolutionary history where we were eating other parts of the animal too, and even that's gotten passed down into pretty modern day cooking, still using some of those things, but a lot of that's kind of dropping out even there, right? So when, just to go back to like that idea of like, how did we become what we were? 7 million years ago, where humans or pre-hominids were developing was very jungly. So and there was actually climate change, which is interesting for modern day use of that word too. But the Earth has gone through all sorts of cycles of climate. And so we were mostly like arboreal apes, right? Chimps live in trees. But what happened was, as the climate actually changed, those jungles became more and more gradually grasslands. And that changed us, because what our environment was, and we talked about this too, epigenetics, I think, was our very first podcast. We talked about that, of literally the environment changes you. And so because our environment was shifting over thousands of generations, right? It wasn't just like, oh, the trees disappeared and now you in the same lifetime changed, right? But all those generations changed. And that changed what we were hunting. It actually brought us to be more upright. So if you look at a chimpanzee, actually, they can't.
That makes sense.
They can't hip extend. So if you look at a chimp, when you see a chimp like stand up tall, it's still kind of hinged forward at the hips. Whereas a human, our natural standing posture would be nice and tall. And then if you actually look at somebody run or skate like a hockey player, their hip actually goes back further. It's called hip extension. And a chimp can't do that. So you can see a chimp walk around on two legs, but if a chimp is going to chase after something or run away from something, it's going to do it on all fours.
Yeah, that makes sense. It makes sense how, our bodies would adapt to a new area running away from prey, also hunting within that area. And it just goes to show how unnatural we use our bodies now, right? Driving in the car, sitting at the desk ergonomically. All those things go against what our bodies are designed for. So, people wonder why there's so many ailments and things like that. Just what we're doing is not a natural fit.
Absolutely.
To how our bodies were designed.
Generational adaptability.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I see so much of that as a chiropractor, right? We get people where their neck is curved forward when you should have a healthy 40 to 45 degree curve in your neck. And most people's neck actually is either straight or crunched forward because of all these different lifestyle factors.
Right.
And so that's a big thing we correct. So come in at 100%. We'll take care of that for you. So anyways, as the landscape changed, what we were hunting changed, what we were eating changed. And gradually with time, there's actually a really cool guy, Daniel Lieberman out of Harvard. And he put together, and maybe we can link to it in the show notes afterwards. There's this really cool video that talks about how the human foot works and how it's actually designed to impact on the ground when we run. There's another great book that I really recommend people check out called Born to Run, and it's a very cool book. It covers a bunch of topics, but within it talks about this idea And literally, as the title implies, we were born to run. We evolved to run. And he talks about, using Lieberman's work and other doctors as well, that as the hip joint changed, so did the ankle joint, and so did the skull size. And so as we began to be able to stand more and more upright, which required both ankle and hip joint to change, we then became capable of actually running on two legs, bipedal running. We're one of the only animals that does that. And as that changed, and this is all tracked through the skeletal record, as those two things changed, the hip and the ankle, so did our brain volume, our skull volume, which implies brain volume inside of it. And the theory that he puts forth in that book is that we did something called persistence hunting, which you can actually still see today. There are still indigenous people, especially, I think it's the Maasai in, I don't know where they are in Africa, but the Maasai, they hunt animals by persistence hunting. And so what they do is you'll actually have like a whole pack of gazelle, and they'll chase after it and separate one out from the pack. And as a band of humans, they'll chase this animal down, and it's kind of brutal, but they'll chase this animal down until it gets heat stroke, and then it can't run anymore. And then at that point, they can just
They're fast gazelles.
kill it with. So this is a great point.
The lions probably saw how they were doing it in packs and hunting and mirrored that maybe.
So it's actually not like lions. So this is an interesting point. Gazelle are way faster than humans. Pretty much any four-legged animal is way faster than humans. I could be wrong, but I believe
Maybe not a turtle.
Just about.
Yeah.
Right, but just about. Like I believe like a hippo can run like 30 miles an hour.
Yeah, they're brutal too.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah, it is.
The fastest human is like 20 miles an hour. Like you take an Olympic gold medalist sprinter, it's the Olympic season right now, right? You take one of those Olympic gold medal sprinters and you literally line him up next to like a hippo, a crocodile, like a bunch of animals that shouldn't be fast, and they win the race.
Yeah.
Like humans are slow. And there's actually this race that happens out in Utah or Nevada. And it's called the Man vs. Horse race. And it's a 100-mile race. Wow. And so this is where humans actually have a huge competitive advantage in running. We are very slow sprinters, very slow. And that was the whole point about all those other animals. But we are the best endurance runners on the planet. There's no animal that can outrun us over distance. So this man versus horse race is actually a really cool example of this, where this is a modern day race that happens, and they line up at some big start line in the desert, and there are people who ride horses, and there are people who run on their feet. And at the start of the race, the horses tear off. They go way out beyond the humans, and the humans are just running kind of marathon pace, right? Because it's either a 50 or 100-mile race. And so they're running at their pace, and the horses get way out in front because they can gallop. They can run way faster. But a quadruped animal can only gallop for a period of time, because when a four-legged animal runs, there's a phase of their gait where their legs are apart, and that literally pulls their diaphragm down, and they can inhale. And then as their legs come together, that forces the diaphragm up and forces an exhale. So this is true of a dog, it's true of a gazelle, it's true of a horse, it's true of a lion, it's true of all four-legged animals. That when they're at a full run, a full gallop, they are in a 1-to-1 ratio of breath to stride.
Interesting.
Now, if you ever walk a dog and you notice, because most of us have examples of dogs, right? They'll pant. That's how they thermoregulate. But they can only pant if they're not running. So a dog can walk and pant. So now they've dysregulated their stride from their breath. But if that dog is made to run, it can't pant while running. It can only inhale, exhale per stride.
Gotcha. Hence the endurance chasing after the gazelle.
Exactly. So in the man versus horse race, the horses take off way out ahead, but eventually those horses have to start to walk. And it's that pacing of the horse from gallop to walk, that the human, almost like the tortoise and the hare story, that human will ultimately catch them and surpass them, because the human can sustain a continuous speed far longer than the horse that's going to up and down speed. And the humans especially win that race, because sometimes the horse wins. But the only time that it's actually weather conditions that really change which one wins. If it's a very cold day that the race is held, the horses can win because they can regulate their temperature better because they're not overheating, right? The weather is actually keeping them cooler, so they don't need to stop to pant. And if it's a very hot day, then the humans dominate and they win by an even bigger margin because the humans can sweat and regulate their breath independent of their stride, right? So what you can sprint and breathe really fast, or you can sprint and breathe really slow.
Yeah.
It's independent of your stride rate. So back to the hunter-gatherer idea, we were persistence hunting because we could actually chase this gazelle, and it was especially useful that it was in a hot climate. And so if you could isolate one gazelle from the pack. Now it doesn't work if you can't isolate one gazelle. So humans were very adept at that too, right? They would spread out and there was just like, a football play, right? Everybody was in the right spot so that once you got the herd to gallop, you could isolate one off to the edge. And as long as you could keep one isolated, it would gallop and get way out ahead of a human, right? A gazelle is an incredibly fast animal. But ultimately, as long as you could prevent it from ever getting back into the pack where you'd lose sight of which one it was, right? If you could isolate that one, it would gallop, but then it would stop to try to thermoregulate, and the humans gradually catch it. And then it would start to go off again as the humans got closer. And if you did that process repeatedly, especially in the heat of the day, you do that at noon, right? That animal can't thermoregulate. Whereas a human, we can carry water, right? So we can regulate temperature with our breath. We can regulate temperature by making sure we're hydrated. And so there's a lot of things a human can do, especially because we didn't need to use all our arms, right? We could now use our hands for holding things, right? And we can also fashion devices, right? You can make a water bottle, right? You can make things like that too, that animals don't have those capacities. So that's where they believe humans figured this process out. And as they were more capable of standing upright, so as the hip joint opened up more, as the ankle joint changed to be bipedal better, then we became even better persistence hunters. And then that process kept feeding forward until we became very efficient at that. And that was our primary way of hunting before we ever had something like an atlatl, which was, they think, one of the first spear type of devices. It's almost like how a lacrosse stick can throw like a ball. But they think that we needed first to persistence hunt because it's a lower skill.
Yeah.
It's just running, right? And so before we ever even figured out how to fashion blades or spears or anything like that, because that's a higher order of thinking.
Well, even Rocky, when he was training, he started out having to get the chicken in the chicken coop.
Yeah.
It's about quickness, right? You have to learn as you go.
Quickness, coordination. Yep.
How coordinated they must have been.
Yes.
And amazingly in tune with their environment and what was going on. And how intense those hunts must have been too together. You with your boys or with your people get to bring it home. That must have been some experience doing that.
Yeah. And you can watch videos of the Maasai hunting because they've actually captured this. Now, because of modern technology, the Maasai have gone more and more towards rifles and weapons, right? Which make them way more efficient hunters, right? You could kill the animal that's standing still 500 yards away, right? Before it ever even tries to run away. But each step of the way it takes a lot of society and cognitive function to fashion a rifle, right? Like if you think about how long it takes to get a rifle, right? It took thousands of years of civilization to go from, just hunting things with our endurance to then figuring out how do you make a projectile like a spear or an atlatl, and then you work that into a bow and arrow, and then you work that ultimately into a firearm, right? Like all of that takes huge amounts of cultural development that has to get passed on generation after generation, iteration after iteration, right? Figuring out gunpowder, right? There's so many layers to figuring that out. You need such a distributed society to figure those things out. You need people who mine stuff, and you need people who are engineers and figure out, this stuff burns and you can pack it together, and right? And all of those things. You need metalworking and all that. So
it makes sense the Native Americans would have followed buffalo too. Like I said, easier to catch, right? They would have bow and arrows at that point and things like that. So their culture following buffalo and for clothing, for food, not just for food, for everything pretty much.
Yeah.
Blankets.
Exactly. So we're extremely in tune with these animals, right? And that is a great point, is that as humans became better and better at doing this persistence hunting and then into hunting with tools, we were able to grow our brain bigger,
Yeah.
which then made us more sophisticated, which made us then able to take the next step. And so that also then undergirds the idea that those early humans weren't sitting down and planting crops to generate their food with.
Right.
The pre-hominids and then early hominids, for what seems to be in the archaeological record a very long time, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years of even Homo sapien, we were first hunting long, long before we ever were able to figure out settled agriculture.
Right.
And so the kind of commonly accepted idea on when agriculture began was about 10,000 years ago, 8 to 10,000 years ago. They think was when we really figured out how to plant seeds in a fertile valley next to a river and time it with the seasons and all of those things. That was an iterative process too. But long, long before we ever got to that stage, we were hunting animals.
Yeah.
And that then means that the genes we hold in our body are significantly more fine-tuned for eating animals than for eating plants broadly.
Wow.
And then so that's really the undergirding of why paleo works, is that our bodies are expecting animal food.
It's how we evolved. It's
exactly.
And I brought up the last time, going to the grocery store, just getting something off the shelf that's quick. There's a lack of that spiritual connection. So then, and even hunters now that may describe going out hunting elk or things like that, there's that when you hunt, and I don't hunt or anything, I can't really say, but you have that connection to the animal. You're cutting the meat, you're eating the meat. There's a whole process to it that is lacking when we're just going to the store and stuff like that. So,
and you see how much we're hurting spiritually as a civilization, right? There's a big disconnect. And so I think a lot of people are waking up to that, whether it's taking that kind of ancestral biology lens. You can apply it in so many ways. You can apply it to nutrition, which is really the focus of what we've been talking about so much, but also we've been touching on these other areas of, well, how should we move, right? Should we be in a car all day and in a desk all day? Well, that's very unnatural. Nobody's been doing that since the last 100 years. Cars were only made in the last 100 years.
And I remember seeing even in the office there at 100%, you guys have the younger, I think it was a younger people too, or part of your presentation phases, right? But now with the kids.
Yeah.
With the kids looking down, texting, their necks are just curved so bad.
Curved the wrong way.
It's such a big problem right now.
Absolutely, right? And that's an environmental factor, right? And so even the ideas of, get outside and get sunlight on your body, don't have as much blue light in your eyes that disrupts your circadian rhythm, right? All those things, the overarching, and this was really what changed my perception on health probably 12, 13 years ago now, was understanding this evolutionary lens to look at things.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It makes sense. It puts some perspective on where we came from. And, I get it. People may, or if they're vegan with animals and cruelty, but, I do think that we were meant for that connection to animals. And there's so many amino acids and nutrition that you can't get elsewhere too. I think it's important. I mean, I've always been a meat eater. I grew up that way. I don't know. It's one of those things where I get why people may feel that way, but I don't know. I think it's a natural way of things.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can appreciate it. Like if somebody's a vegan for religious reasons, right? Like a Hindu or something like that. Of course. I mean, I believe in freedom, right? You should be able to do whatever you want, right? As long as you're not hurting other people. I think that's a great general rule of thumb, right? But I think if you're really talking about it from a health perspective and even the ethical perspective, there's kind of a tough argument to be made for vegans when you really drill down, because the amount of land that needs to get cleared to grow farmland, you've deforested, you've destroyed habitat, you've pushed all the animals that naturally exist on that land off the land, which kills most of them.
There's a lot of things that are not good for the environment, mass producing, all the Impossible Burgers, all that kind of stuff. It's a whole different type of environmental issue.
Yeah, it's a trickier conversation than most people are willing to have. And you can look at it superficially and say, oh, well, I'm just eating salad, so no animals were hurt in the making of this salad. That's a very superficial way to see it. If you actually ask those deeper questions of, well, where did the salad come from? And how was it harvested, and how did they make sure the insects didn't eat it, and how did they make sure the birds and the deer didn't eat it? And you start to go down that layer, and it's not nearly as clear as people want to make it. So I do think if somebody, again, I support anybody doing it any way they want to do it, but from a certainly, and it's unequivocal, from a nutritional perspective, veganism cannot hold a candle to eating a paleo diet. There is no competition between the two. And the only way to even begin to get close to the nutritional value of eating animal food from a pure vegan perspective is doing a lot of supplementation. And at that point, you then need to ask yourself the question, okay, veganism is an incomplete diet, period, right? So if you have to admit that the only way to get the proper B vitamins and all of the other aspects, all the proper amino acids that you would get if you ate animal food, and you were going to do that from a vegan diet, you then have to bring in outside supplements to do it. So that whole diet is incomplete,
so
period.
The natural aspect.
You have to admit that it's an incomplete diet. And so if somebody at the end of all that still says, well, I really want to be a vegan and I have the amenities of a modern world around me to allow this to happen, because also there's no such thing as a vegan hunter-gatherer, right? There's nobody. So if you go back 10,000 years, nobody's a vegan. Zero people are vegans. So you can't get to the modern era without eating animals. So if you want to take the privilege of being a modern human with all of the modern world around you, and you want to eat a vegan diet, that's cool. And you can then use a whole bunch of supplements to try and piece back together the nutrients you're missing in the first place.
If there's anyone that is a vegan and wants to come on this show and to have a talk about that, because we're always open to learning everybody else's diet perspective, because there's a lot that I can learn overall when I say this, just really how I've grown up. And, for me, it's been fine. I mean, I went a nice, not long ago, about almost 30 days eating pretty clean.
Yeah.
And no edibles, no alcohol, nothing like that.
Nice.
Just completely clean. And I felt great. Like you said with Dr. Sarah, the energy levels, I was
great.
more productive, more clear, happier, just, on a good vibe.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not trying to trash veganism.
No, not at all.
Because I think there's actually a bunch of veganism that lines up with paleo, ironically, right? Like if you think fruit, veggies, nuts, and seeds, that all lines up on a vegan diet, right? Mm-hmm. And I definitely applaud the vegans who try to do veganism without all the processed food, because there's definitely like a dirty version of vegan where you're just eating Oreos, because Oreos are technically vegan, but that doesn't mean it's good for you, right? So you can do a dirty version of veganism, and that I think is very misguided, because you're basically eating a standard American diet devoid of animal food. So then you're just going to be very nutrient deplete. But I do think there's a clean way to do veganism of you're eating lots of salads and you're eating nuts and seeds. And I think that gets you a pretty good place. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I would just say those people would do even better if they added in meat. Yeah. Or at least organ meat. Even if they don't want to eat like a ribeye steak or something like that.
Liver.
Take some liver, right? Take a liver capsule, right?
Makes me think of liverwurst. I was never the biggest fan. My dad used to eat that on a sandwich. I always thought it was gross.
Liverwurst.
It's like the liverwurst. It's like, liverwurst is basically a spread of liver.
Oh.
But people put it back in the day mostly on sandwiches. My dad used to do it, but I thought it's the grossest thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't taste good at all. It's basically a spread, almost like it looks like a Nutella, but it's liver.
It's liver. That's, nutrient dense. The way I eat most of my organs is actually I use organ supplements. So it's very easy. I think I mentioned them on here before. Heart and Soil is the brand, and it's all grass-fed animals. It's all grass-fed cows, and they take the organs and they dehydrate them, and then they powderize it. So they desiccate it and powderize it, and they put them into capsules. So you feel like you're just taking any other supplement. But the advantage is that you're actually eating the whole organ as opposed to a supplement. So most people don't know this, but if you eat a supplement, say like a B vitamin supplement, right? It's got the whole multi-spectrum B vitamins in it, right? You're not eating a piece of meat or something, which would be nutrient dense in B vitamins. They have chemically engineered in giant vats. Most of the time it's a bacteria that they've gotten to produce whatever nutrient they're trying to package. And then there's a whole chemical process to separate that out so that now you have isolated this nutrient. And then under the most ideal circumstance, you're now taking a capsule that has just that nutrient in it. Okay. Now, there's also a lot of funny business in the supplement industry because it's not regulated very well. So you can get a lot of other stuff in that supplement that you didn't necessarily want to eat. But let's say it's a perfect supplement. It's just right? It's all your B vitamins. There's still a big difference for what your body evolutionarily, right? We go back to the ancestral lens. Your body was expecting to eat those B vitamins in the form of meat.
Right.
So there's an entourage effect that is not just that you're getting those vitamins and minerals that were identified in meat. There's a bunch of stuff in all food, whether you're eating an apple, whether you're eating kale, whether you're eating steak or liver. There's a bunch of stuff in there that we haven't identified yet. But all of it works together like a symphony, right? Yeah. So you don't want to just pull out the violinist.
Like the parts of the DNA, nobody knows what that is, but it's needed for the overall.
Right. It's not there by accident.
Life, right.
Right. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. There's a big difference between listening to one person play the violin or listening to a symphony, right? And that, I would argue that when you take a supplement, you're doing much more of like a solo artist performing than having the whole symphony behind them. And from an evolutionary perspective, we were always listening to the symphony, not listening to a soloist, right? And so I think there are supplements that make sense for people to take, but I do think in the broadest sense, even the term supplement is supplement. It's in addition to, right? So it shouldn't be the thing that gives you your nutrients. It should be in addition to a really great diet that gives you lots of good nutrients. Now you can up that a little bit. So for me, most of the supplements that I take are actually not supplements, but they're actually those organ. So for lack of a better word, we call them organ supplements, but it's basically just dehydrated organs that I'm eating. So I'm getting the whole symphony as opposed to just B12 or just B6, right? I'm getting all of it. And so I think that's really valuable. And I think that's the easiest, most palatable way to get your organs is just in that capsulized form.
What about fish oil? Oh, go ahead, Mark.
I had a couple questions. I didn't want to look at my phone. I had them written down here, but I think I just erased it by mistake.
No worries.
3 questions, but one, how often can a paleo diet be used, if that makes sense?
Yeah, well, ideally, it would be every day for all of your life.
Cool.
Yeah, I want to go to the next question too, but I want to give this one its due time. We use the phrase diet, for lack of a better word, almost like I was saying about the supplement, for lack of a better word. It's really like a nutritional strategy, I would say, right? Like that's how we should think about it, right? Mm-hmm. So whatever anybody's eating on an ongoing basis is their nutritional strategy. Now, most people don't conceptualize it like that. It's almost like a fish in water. It's just like, what's water? I don't know. It's just the thing that's around me all the time, right? And so most people are just going through their day eating whatever the stuff you eat is. That's your nutritional approach. That's your nutritional strategy, whether you've given it thought or whether it's just what you've inherited by being a human in 2024. The notion of the paleo diet or the nutritional strategy of paleo would be that, hey, let's just be conscientious of what we're eating. Let's ask the first question of what is our body expecting to eat? What good science can we line up behind that of what do we know about our ancestors? What do we know about the nutrients themselves in those categories of food? And then let's just eat that stuff and cut out all the stuff that isn't actually good for us, that's actually lighting the fire inside our body in a negative way.
I think making sure how we feel too. How do you feel on a diet? You mentioned also that one kind of binge day and how sick you'll be after. So knowing what foods are making you feel this way, I had a little bit too much sugar this time and I'm feeling like I got a headache or I'm off. So I love that aspect of it takes a couple of weeks for me anyway. The first 4 days are the worst. I'm irritable, I'm annoying, like Kristen's like, and then after that it gets better and better. But after a couple of weeks, that's where I hit I don't want to go back.
Yeah.
I really don't want to go back. And then when I fall and like right now I'm off track, I'm now getting back on where I want to go that another, all right, I want to do 35 days now.
Yeah.
Lift it up, because it really is. It's putting myself on challenges, to like 10-day challenges. I'm going to do this for 10 days. Then I'm going to do it for 14 days. Then I'm going to do it, small increments helps me too.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, there's so much there. I think easy wins is a concept that is a good idea, right? Whether it's you wake up when you set your alarm the night before and you woke up on the alarm, or you kept hitting snooze, right? Like there's an easy win there. If you just get out of bed, then you can know for the rest of your day, I did what I said I would do.
Yeah.
I did it the first thing today. I did what I said I would do.
So there's
right?
a discipline
And that's
to it.
positive momentum, right? Or you work out in the morning because I said I was going to do it, right? And then that gives you energy for the rest of the day, and that gives you congruency in your own heart, that you know that you're the type of person who does what they say they'll do, right? So I think building easy wins is great. I do the same thing. I don't even know if we talked about this yet, but from a movement perspective, and I know we're going to go into this on subsequent episodes, but I always like to set the bar really low on what you should do as your daily movement. Because if you say, I'm going to go to the gym an hour a day, there's going to be some days you can't go to the gym at all.
Right.
And maybe there's days that you're tight and you know you don't have an hour. But is it worth going for 10 minutes? Is it worth going for 20 minutes? I think the answer is yes. But if your mindset is the only thing that gives me the check mark that day, that gives me my gold star on my chart, is an hour. Yeah. So if I'm there for 50 minutes, I failed. Well, I think that's way more harmful to hold that belief pattern, because that's going to mean that any day you can do 59 minutes or less of exercise, you're not going to do any exercise.
I think having an understanding of the science of habits and how they work, and atomic habits, things like that, are really important, because you nailed it. If I jump in, or if somebody jumps right into 10 push-ups every day, even 10, that pain, or 15 or something like that, if they don't really do it at all. So if you're somebody that doesn't do push-ups ever each day, and then you jump into 10, 15, I'm going to do this every day, you're going to avoid that pain. If you're not doing it anyway, why not do 1 or 2 push-ups?
Yes.
And then the next week, just add 1 or 2 more.
That's right.
So you're doing 3 the next week. Then you're doing 4 the following. Next thing you know, you're doing 50 push-ups. But not only that, you've instilled a great habit as well, because you did it slow and worked yourself up to it instead of going in straight up.
100%.
Small increments.
Really.
Through time.
People want fast results. I think they want it right away. That's the problem. But they don't realize that there's a process to it.
Yeah.
And it's not that long, a couple months, you'll see real results.
I think,
Mark, you go.
I'm sorry. I think life is sometimes like change. Like sometimes the little bit of change you have, the little bit of movements that you do in life adds up to bigger,
I
things.
agree with that.
And,
yeah.
The loose change, the loose small things in life that you got to deal with. Once you fix those little small things and little increments and things like that, the bigger things in life, and everything,
Yeah, absolutely. Doing new things creates those connections in the brain. Doing something different and adding on, I think, is big.
The small increments.
Yeah.
That adds up.
Creating momentum, right? And like you were saying, it all adds up too. But even if you get to the point of doing 50 push-ups a day, I always like to say, from a movement perspective, say you're going to do 1 set of something every day, because I would way rather overachieve than feel like I underachieved. So even if you can do 50 push-ups in a day, you just say, I'm going to do 1 set of push-ups. Maybe you do 10, right? Yeah. Maybe you do 1, whatever it is. But you now have given yourself positive momentum that day, where you're like, I did my set. Right. So then you're more likely to do another set an hour later, right? And you have a gap in your day. So it's between meetings or Zoom calls or whatever. Let me drop down. Let me do a couple push-ups. Let me do some air squats, right? Yeah. Let me do some pull-ups when I go by the pull-up bar in my house, right? And before you know it, like you said, Mark, that's that loose change that adds up, right? All of a sudden, that was actually something I tried in chiropractic school, which was really cool. Between our classes, we had a 10-minute break. And so my very first semester of chiropractic school, I had one of those like little agenda journals that like you would write out your assignments and kind of make sure you were on track for stuff. The back page was just empty. So I would put a tally mark every time I did a pistol squat. And so I would go out on my 10-minute break between classes, and I would do 3 pistol squats on my left leg, 3 pistol squats on my right leg, and go back into class. And that gave me a little bit of fresh air, some sunshine, a little bit of movement, right? And doing a couple pistol squats isn't going to change your life. But I remember at the end of that first semester, I had done hundreds of pistol squats.
Wow.
Which would have like been a crushing workout to do in the gym. If you tried to do hundreds of one-legged squats in one day, like you're not going to walk the next day. But what was really cool was it just added up across time. So at no point was I sweaty or was I like too weak to walk up the stairs or anything like that. Like it just added up across months, right? And then all of a sudden you turn back around and you realize, holy crap, I did a lot, right? That's pretty cool. And so I think that loose change idea is great of, hey, set the bar low, give yourself something that you can hit as an easy win, keep building up on it, and then look back in time and say, oh my gosh, I did a lot this week. I did a lot this month. I did a lot this year. And it's a heck of a lot more than if you did 0 every day.
Yeah, not everybody like myself can go cold turkey with things too. So even from the diet perspective, just like you had mentioned at one point, adding some salads or going slow, just taking something away normally maybe that's bad for you that you eat, or slowly portioning it or weighing it and going in increments, and not just I'm going to clean out everything that's junk and then crave it later and go to the store and get it.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to try to figure out how do you go paleo, right? But I do think, like you said, being forgiving with yourself, being gentle with yourself, creating easy wins along the way is really powerful. I think a lot of people benefit from that 6 on, 1 off, because that gives you that release valve and it gives you good contrast between I ate really clean, I felt great. So like say Saturday is your cheat day. Well, when you wake up Saturday morning, you should feel really good because you just had 6 days in a row of eating clean. And then when you wake up Sunday morning, you're probably not going to feel as good as you did the day before because you got wild on Saturday. And I think that contrast really helps if that's too challenging for people, right? But also don't make perfect the enemy of good, right? Maybe you go 3 days clean and then somebody visits you from out of town or whatever, and you go out to dinner and you say, oh, let's just have some fun, whatever, right? But the more that you can dial it in, I think the better you'll feel and the more contrast you'll have. And then that creates a momentum unto itself of, like you said, I'm craving it. I want to get back to eating clean.
Yeah, and then I've justified after working out, oh, I could eat this because I worked out, things like that. But there's nothing better than being on that streak. You know, now that things could be expensive, groceries, cost of living going up, things like that, that type of meat could be pricey. You had mentioned that you make your own beef jerky, things like that. Are there any practical things like advices like that you can give people that might be like, well, it's a great diet, I could do it, but it's expensive to go and get all the meat and things like that. It's cheaper to get something else that may be less healthy.
Yeah. Okay. So a couple things, right? We can go the meal prep route and talk about actual like strategies, but then your first question there was also the financial piece. So what I would on the financial side, and then we'll go back to the other piece.
Yeah.
First of all, and this is kind of like the idea, you already are on a diet anyway. You already are eating. Everybody eats, right? So everybody already is doing something. They're making some decision about what they want to put into their body. Now, maybe it's a not very conscientious decision they're making. They're just kind of passively eating what's around. But you are making nutritional decisions every day. So the encouragement would be make well-informed, intentional decisions about your nutrition rather than uninformed, passive decisions about your nutrition. In that same context, you spend money on food. Nobody's eating for free right now. So if you actually look at how much do I spend on food, okay, let's say you spend $100 a week on food. Just so it's a simple number, right? Okay, I spend $100 a week on food. I spend $400 a month on food. Okay, that's your budget. Now just change what you spend that $100 on. And yes, there's obviously, you could get infinitely expensive eating a paleo diet. You could get the most expensive grass-fed ribeyes, blah, 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 right? But a carton of eggs, right? A couple dozen eggs a week, fairly affordable. Yeah, of course, everything's going up in price, but also eating your junk food has gone up in price too, right? Yeah. I think groceries have gone up like 24% in like the last couple of years. So like everything's more expensive no matter if you're eating clean or you're eating dirty. So figure out whatever you do spend on groceries, which also includes going out to eat. It includes snacks. It includes coffees on the run. It includes all that stuff too, right? So sometimes people say my grocery bill's low, but then They went out to eat.
Right.
They did Uber Eats to the office a couple times. They grabbed some crap at the gas station. Right? Well, that's your grocery bill too, man. You can't not count that, right? So if you actually figure out how much you do spend on food, that gives you a number to aim for on the other side. And then there's definitely more affordable and less affordable ways to go paleo. From a guideline perspective, I think you're much better off eating the lowest quality paleo foods than not eating paleo at all.
Gotcha.
Right? So if your option is I can go to the store and I can either buy conventional ground beef, right? Just regular ground beef, has antibiotics added to the animals, right? There were hormones given to the cows. It was fed grain, right? It was a caged animal, all that. Just a conventional, cheapest ground beef you can find at, whatever grocery store you go to, right? You're still way better off eating that level, the non-organic apples, the non-organic vegetables, the non-organic nuts and seeds. You're way better off eating that than saying, I can't afford to eat paleo, so I'm just going to eat pizza today.
Yeah.
Because that pizza isn't organic either. So like you're already starting at the same place, right? So you might as well
Make the better decision out of the...
make the better decision for where you're at.
Makes sense.
Now let's say you have already, you're eating, you go to Whole Foods every week and you buy the organic pizzas and the organic pastas and the soy milk and the this and the that. Well, all right, your budget's really high on food. Again, stay at Whole Foods if you love shopping at Whole Foods and you're blessed enough to be able to do it. Then go to Whole Foods and just buy their steak.
Yeah.
Buy their chicken. Right? So
They have the
I would say
boxes
just
now,
move
too.
laterally.
The box deliveries and even for meat.
Oh, yeah, there's
they
a
have
bunch of those.
The steaks that's looking into like the Hello Freshes, all those kind of
Yeah.
things too.
There's a bunch of different services, right? So I would say exactly. I think the easiest way to make a change is to make an incremental change.
Yeah,
So
that's good advice.
if you do the meal services to your house, just look for and a lot of those, they already categorize it. Oh, you could do the paleo Hello Fresh versus the, whatever other box you checked on Hello Fresh,
Yeah.
right? And they'll do all that for you, right? If you already go to the grocery store and ShopRite's your grocery store, okay, cool. Let's just shift what is going into the cart, right? And you'll save a bunch of money because you're not eating all the junk. You're not eating the sodas and the chips and the pastas and the breads and all those things. Now you're just putting the energy into other stuff. But there's definitely affordable ways to go paleo in terms of eggs, ground beef, chicken, right? Again, on chicken, like what do people always want? They want the chicken breast. Well, that's the most expensive chicken.
You showed us.
Oh yeah, I'll put that up in a second.
Yeah, that chart was good where it listed the meat first, whatever spices, vegetables. I don't think they were fruit, but like whatever you could mix match.
The food matrix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the food matrix, right? When we were looking at that was something that was really cool.
Yeah, I'll pull that up. But what I was also going to say is like eating the cheaper cuts are just as good, right? Like you don't need to buy the filet mignon. That's not the only paleo meat. Like the whole point is the whole cow is paleo.
So you think
right?
like 80% minimum lean wise when you're getting meat or should go do the 90? No, it's not like that.
Not at all. Fat is
I
good
usually
for
try
you.
to go lean as I can, but
Yeah, you don't need to at all. Fat is actually really good for you. Fat is fuel. So yeah, when I get ground beef, I always do like 80%.
Yeah.
80-20 on that. Not just because we talked the 80-20 principle, but I actually like the fat. It's good for you. It's very healthy. It's satiating. There's a ton of properties to the different fatty acids in animal fat that are very healthful. So a lot of people get that wrong too. They want to eat really lean. That's a misnomer. That's part of the same school of thought that says, oh, Cheerios are good for your heart and all that nonsense. It's
like
not
cardboard.
Yeah. It's also inflammation. It's like there's so much wrong with Cheerios, but it's processed food fundamentally, right? Without going off that rabbit hole. But yeah, the food matrix. But yeah, even on the chicken stuff, right? Like chicken thighs, that's cheaper per pound than chicken breast, right? There's nothing wrong with the dark meat. It's actually loaded with good fat and it's great for you, right? You could do the drumsticks with the bone in. Like, so there's a lot of ways that you can, and also if you're willing to cook, it usually gets a lot cheaper when you start buying in bulk. So like if you get a whole chicken instead of just the chicken breast, like if you get the actual whole chicken bone in, that's great. You can turn that into a bone broth after you cook it. That's actually one of my favorite meals.
Yeah.
So and so this was kind of part 2 of it, and then I'll show the food matrix in a second. But if you take the whole chicken, right, get a cookie sheet out, right, cut up different veggies. So usually the classics would be carrot, celery, onion, but you can add in whatever other veggies you like. Layer that all on the bottom of the pan. Then take the bird, cut the spine out of the bird, and then butterfly it. Put that over it. Keep the spine. If the bird came with all the innards and everything, like a lot of birds do, put all that in a saucepan or in a crock pot. Season up your chicken the way you like it. Cook it in the oven.
We're coming over for lunch.
Yeah.
Right. We're going right after the show.
Let's do it. And once you cook that bird, all the fat drips off the bird into those veggies, caramelizes all the veggies underneath. It's a delicious meal. You already have in the saucepan with some water the spine, which includes spinal cord and bone marrow and tons of nutrients that you need that nobody's eating the spine when they eat the bird. So you might as well put it in the water, let all that cook into the water. Then take whatever's left of the bird after everybody eats the bird, all those bones, whatever skin wasn't eaten, whatever, all the stuff, all the gristle, all that's cartilage, which is what you pay so much for a collagen powder supplement on, right? Put all that stuff into the saucepan, let that cook for 24 hours, strain it so that it's just the liquid, and now you've got an awesome bone broth.
Yeah, using everything.
Super nutrient dense, and then you can either put that into your ground beef or make a soup out of it, or, right? And now, also, what did you just do? You made a second meal out of the first meal.
Right.
The price per pound on a whole chicken is way lower than chicken breast, right? So you're paying a premium for just part of the animal. Whereas if you get the whole animal, you get all the bones, you get all the collagen that's in it, you get all the cuts of meat in it. It's at the cheapest price point anyway. And now you've just made a second meal out of it. And again, eggs are one of the most affordable sources of protein.
Yeah.
And it's a complete form of protein. You can eat a bunch of eggs. In fact, all the time I do it just because I like it, but it also stretches your grocery bill farther. Is a lot of times I'll make ground beef, I'll warm that up in the pan, and then I'll crack 4 eggs in, and then I'm doing 4 eggs plus ground beef. So I'm getting a ton of protein, but it's also cheaper to have eggs than ground beef.
Yeah.
So I've just made a meal that feels good because there's variety. There's some meat, there's some eggs, right? I put some veggies in there, put some seasonings on there.
Sounds good.
It's a great meal.
I just made that the other day. Scrambled some eggs with some ground beef, seasoned it.
Yeah. Yeah, you could put some
onions and
yeah.
Right, onions and like kale leaves and stuff like that, seasoned herbs, made a sandwich out of it.
That's good. See, I don't take enough time.
Eggs and
Kristen's
ground
good
beef.
with it. Yeah.
Basically.
Kristen's a very good cook, and she cooks healthy. A lot of salad. She's been an amazing influence on me. I've said it a bunch of times here because for me, I don't take the time to cook and to do those things like I should. I'm usually putting so much into my day towards the end. It's not so, that limited time, but there's no excuse of putting some eggs together with some ground beef. That's easy enough. I mean, that's something that does not take long.
Teamwork is key.
I know.
When you have an amazing wife, that's the greatest gift in the world. And
she points me
shout
in the
out to
right
Nicole, the greatest wife of all time. So love you, honey.
There you go.
But yeah, I mean, right, there's so much to be said for that, for being part of a team.
Yeah.
And then also when you said, I do think the number one skill you can develop if you want to really take control of your health from a nutritional perspective is cooking. There is no way to eat as well at the same price as if you can cook. Yeah. Now, if money is no factor, you could have a chef do it. You could go, but even if you go to the nicest restaurants,
right,
you're eating crap.
Yeah,
you could go to I've been blessed. I've been able to go to some really, really expensive restaurants. They're using canola oil in the back. They're cutting
trying
corners.
to cut costs.
They're doing all sorts of garbage. They're adding sugar to the food to make it taste better. It's extremely difficult if you want to have somebody else cook for you other than your wife, right? Other than family, right? If you want to have some restaurant cook for you,
it's not going to be the best ingredients.
It's going to be extremely difficult to find a truly healthy place to eat. There was one place, shout out to Good Kitchen and Market in Marietta, Georgia, that was so unique. I've never found another restaurant like this. I know they exist, but it was near my chiropractic college in Georgia. And the woman who started the restaurant had actually had stage 4 cancer and had tried the oncological way of going about it, the medical way of going about it, and they gave up hope. The doctors gave up hope on her and said, none of the chemo has worked. You're going to die. You should just kind of get your stuff squared away. We're done. We can give you palliative care. Wow. And this woman said, I'm not going to die.
Wow.
And she turned it around with nutrition, and she's still alive to this day. And so she opened a restaurant after healing her cancer that it was a paleo restaurant, and it only served the food that was paleo because her commitment was, I want to make a restaurant that people could go to and actually get real food and not have the junk oils and the sugars and all the stuff that's added in. So this was a great place, but I found one restaurant like that. And I know I could look harder for it, but again, I really do believe in take control of your health, do your cooking. So that's great that Kristen helps you so much. And in that,
she's a good influence.
She's a great influence.
Yeah.
And in that vein too, meal prep is what makes it possible.
Yeah.
So you can't cook every single night. I mean, maybe you're blessed enough to have that type of time, but like you said, you're getting after it. You're doing other things. And same in my life. So what we always do is we meal prep. Like actually this morning, I browned up like 6 pounds of ground beef in a big pasta pot. It's funny, we have pasta pots, but we never cook pasta, right? That's my ground beef maker, right? And so as I was cooking breakfast for my son and we're playing in the kitchen, and I just had a big pot on the stove, and it was just browning up ground beef. And then that meat gets put into the fridge in the whole pot, right? And you could do the same thing with chicken. You can do on the grill, on the stovetop, you could do it in the oven, however you want to cook your chicken, right? Cook up a bunch of chicken. So then you have a bunch of chicken and a bunch of ground beef. Every week, that's what we do at the house. You also mentioned I make my own beef jerky, right? We have a dehydrator on the countertop. I cut up about 4 or 5 pounds of meat, dehydrate that, and then that's my beef jerky. So every week we have these basic forms of protein already made. Also, while I'm doing cooking, usually weekends, like Saturday, Sunday, we kind of break it up naturally across the day of cooking all the different stuff that we buy at the grocery store. And we'll cook up a bunch of different veggies. And then you put all that into Pyrex dishes in the fridge, and those sit. And so then say it's a Monday night, okay? I get back from work. What am I going to do? I'm going to pop out 2 frying pans on the stove. I'm going to go over to the fridge.
Yeah.
I'm going to grab the ground beef. I'm going to put a bunch of ground beef into one pan. I'm going to go into the other pan. I'm going to put my veggies that we either meal prepped, or a great option is frozen veggies.
Yeah.
So Trader Joe's sells a lot of different frozen veggies that are great. Lots of supermarkets do too, but it's just pure, it's the veggie. It's frozen. There's no additives, there's no fillers, there's nothing. It's the vegetable. And so a lot of times I'll grab like a bag of frozen Brussels sprouts because I really like frozen Brussels sprouts. And I'll pop a bag of frozen Brussels sprouts into pan 2. Pan 1 has my ground beef in it. I heat both up. I go get changed. I do whatever dad things I need to do and husband things I need to do and all that type of stuff. Go back over to the stove, stir everything up, let it cook a little longer, add some seasonings to it, right? And I think that's one of the keys with the meat is don't over season it when you first cook it, right? So it's just like pepper, salt, garlic is what I
So
put
keeping
in
it
the
simple.
meat. Keep it really simple, because then on Monday night, we can make a taco flavor. So I put the cumin in and I put some spices in and and then maybe on the next day, I want to make it like Italian seasonings. Then I put more of the Italian seasonings in, right? And so you can give yourself variety that week, even though the base is pre-made, ready to go. And so that's how we make our meals.
No, that's great. For time purposes, we do have to wrap it up.
Okay, cool.
It went by fast. I know there's probably some more things that we could talk about, which we could either save for our next one, or I know you had mentioned movement.
Yeah.
Something we could dive. But, Dr. Matt, we really appreciate when you come in. You're going to be somebody that is going to be doing it once a month with us.
Thank you.
Because you're a valued guest. And I know we can learn a lot and really continue to talk about so many different things. I mean, it really doesn't even have to be food. Just subjects are going to be endless, really, on this show. So really appreciate you always coming on board and doing your thing, man. It was really informative again.
Thank you so much,
Really,
Jeff.
absolutely.
And thank you so much, Mark. Yeah, I really appreciate you guys. And we'll put it into the show notes, but this was the food matrix that you talked about.
Yeah, the food matrix was really something cool. What book is that again, Matt?
This is out of the book Wired to Eat.
Yeah, check out
by
Wired
Rob
to Eat,
Wolf.
everybody.
And just real simple, and then we can wrap. The idea is that there's columns, right? And Nick and Slavik are amazing. They'll put it in the actual visuals. Basically, the simplest way to do it is what I was just describing, that food I was talking about, right? That Monday night dinner, right? What they recommend is you take a meat, you take a veggie, you can add nuts and seeds and fruits, which aren't in that matrix, but you could add those in too. You add some oil to cook it in.
Yeah.
And then you put your seasonings on. And based on which ones you pull, you can make such a variety of meals.
Yeah.
And so
that's simple enough for me to use it.
super
That's why I
simple.
love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you everybody for tuning in to Ride the Wave. We appreciate you. Dr. Matt, thank you so much again.
Thank you, guys.
Take care, everybody.
As always, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Till next time.
Thank you for tuning in to Ride the Wave. It's been a pleasure having you with us as we explore ways to make a positive impact together. Remember, every little wave creates a ripple of change. We appreciate any support you can provide as we plan to build an all-inclusive, modern campus and empower communities. For details on how you can contribute through various platforms, please visit us at ridethewave.org. Until next time, keep riding the wave of change with us. I'm Jeff Fisher, signing off, but the journey continues.